Hi. So I wanted to take a little bit of a pause and talk a little about how I'm working and some shortcuts that I have. Um, and some of this does apply and some of it doesn't to digital versus analog. Um, so what I wanted to kind of go back into is that I have this really rough sketch. Let me kind of hide everything but the the super rough sketch. Um, and yeah, that's my mountains. Like it's just this little thing, and I wanted to add that you can use tracing paper or even just a thin sheet of copier paper to just do a quick layout and just put it on top of your super nice watercolor paper to just sort of see like how does that work. But I'm still using it, so you'll see it kind of appear and disappear as we're doing the time lapse thing. Um, and Here I have the first mountain behind the Gecko cave. And when I'm working on the Gecko cave, what I'm starting to do is really play with what I would call the warms and the cools. I'm not in love with this yellow that I have here. Let me go, I'm on the wrong layer. I'm not in love with that yellow. I feel like it's a little too lemony. I want to kind of warm it up a little bit, so I'll probably go back into that. But I do find that, especially if you're talking about a fog and mist kind of thing situation, that warming up your grays with some yellows and grays that have a little bit of yellow in them are very interesting, and it's beautiful, kind of a little bit unusual, but also very common in nature. So there's that. Um, Now, as I'm working on this next mountain that's popping over, a couple of notes is that you can see that I'm overlapping it because you know what, I might want to move things around a little bit, and I don't want to have to like add on and redraw and stuff. And I find it's just easier while I'm at it to just overlap. And that way, if I decide later on, I'm like, you know what, I want to make this smaller or larger. I'm just not, just creating that overlap just makes things easier to work with. Now, here's another cool little shortcut. I find it a little bit boring to do a gajillion trees. So what I've been doing is on separate layers creating little patches of trees, and then I'm duplicating and then I'm flipping them, and I'm and I find like, so for example, let's see, let's pick on this one, or better yet, yeah, it's that one. Um, Sometimes it's, you can name these layers, but I find that it just gets for me to be just a little bit too much. So all right, so this one, here we go. um, I find that if I was to just duplicate this uh, and then paste, and then so now I have two layers exactly the same, and then transform it and kind of move it over, I find that it looks a little bit too much all the same. But if I flip it, I kind of create a little bit of variation, and it also kind of helps the, if you look at sort of trees going down a mountainside, a lot of times you'll see these sort of weird little paths or things like that, or layers of them anyway. And there's a little bit of irregularity, so I'm trying to kind of build, on the one hand, be very lazy, yes, I own that, but also kind of build into that process, making it kind of irregular. So I'm just going to delete that layer, and then once and I'm pretty much there, that's why I kind of paused it. um, Once I get this mountain looking basically like how I like it, I'm just going to merge these things down. Now, you could make the argument of like, oh, why do that? Actually, it wouldn't be all bad too. Like, I might just leave these as two layers. Um, I kind of have this sort of shadow background of the mountain, and then I have the trees on top. This one is a little bit combined, when and that's maybe a good example of somebody who's might who might be doing this for I'm just thinking of some for my purposes for the commercial work I've done. It really hasn't mattered. But for somebody who's, let's say, doing stuff for video games or more higher end illustration, they might be more disciplined than I am about that. But that's just a cool little shortcut. If you're working on traditional mediums, you might consider having a brush that is sort of manky, that you can just ching, 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 and so that you can kind of speed up that process a little bit with texture. In fact, a lot of times I'll use those brushes that you get from hardware stores that are like the cheap $1 1-inch brushes. I find those are great for creating grass textures or textures in general. So there's that. And oh yeah, the sky. So with the sky, same thing in terms of you can see how I'm really letting it sort of bleed down. I use the watercolor brush, which actually does a really good job of imitating watercolor. This is also water. There's many different brushes. I won't fall down that rabbit hole. But I'm creating I'm playing with, again, we always keep coming back to color versus value, and so I'm playing with both. There's kind of there's a color shift with this sort of warm color here, sort of warm yellow ochreish, and there's color shift here with this sort of gray, and in places it's blending in together, which is quite lovely. Unlike the ugly yellow circles I'm drawing. And I'm just letting it kind of flow. And in some ways, you could say this whole piece is about playing with warms and cools. Even though overall the atmosphere of this sort of what will be a misty mountain type thing with epic Gecko, it's about creating, even though it will be kind of a cool effect overall, the little warm tones will help liven it up and give it some vibrancy as well. So, thank you for watching. I'm gonna just put that all back together so you can see how it's developing along. I'm gonna be adding more mountains. I'm kind of treating myself to the Gecko last. I'm like, I can't wait to do that. And I'll be doing a separate layer and drawing on a separate layer the Gecko. This blue is just to kind of, it's almost like a for position only kind of thing. And we'll go from there. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you. I am so stoked to see what you guys do with this. Okay, bye now.